A massive fraud scheme uncovered in Minnesota found money intended for social services has been allegedly siphoned indirectly into the pockets of the Somali terrorist group al-Shabaab. Somali immigrants in Minnesota have reportedly been abusing systems meant to help the most unfortunate among us, including the latest federally funded autism services. The autism fraud scheme reportedly amassed $14 million through Medicare claims for services that were never provided, involving kids who never had autism. And the Somali immigrants behind this web of schemes have allegedly stolen billions from taxpayers, much of the money going back to the Somali government, where it would then end up in the hands of terrorists. Manhattan Institute investigative reporter Ryan Thorpe was one of the first exposing the schemes for their ties to terrorism. With us now, Ryan, a line from your story stuck out. The largest funder of al-Shabaab is the Minnesota taxpayer, and you cite an unnamed source.
All right, let's talk about this. Now, this story hits close to home because if you guys remember, I'm born and raised in North Minneapolis, and I actually went to school in South Minneapolis. And even back then, the Somali population was very high. I used to have friends make fun of me, saying that I'm going to be going to Somalia whenever I was going to school, things like that. And it seems as though the population has only risen, and there's been more that have been going to Minnesota. And I'd be lying if I told you I was surprised about this story and let me start off by saying I don't mean every Somali person that's in Minnesota, but I would say the majority of Somalian people that are in Minneapolis or in Minnesota are Muslim. And if you look around the world, Muslim people aren't coming to America to conform to American ways or American values. They want America to conform to their values and what they believe in. You can even see that in Minnesota and then Dearborn, Michigan, where they're getting the prayer played on the loudspeaker 5 times a day and all this different stuff. So they're not conforming to the way of the United States. They are trying to make the cities that they're living in conform to the way that they live, and they're trying to spread out. So I'm not surprised at all that money has been sent overseas back to the Taliban, and the taxpayers are the ones funding the Taliban. But let this news clip finish.
For that, what is the evidence that all of this money that was taken and the billions upon billions of increased funding in Minnesota for social services ended up in Somalia?
Well, billions of dollars of government welfare money is missing in the state of Minnesota.
How do we define missing?
Well, the fraud is so bad that the U.S. Attorney's Office has come out and indicated that they believe their entire government programs, where the fraudulent claims outstrip the legitimate ones. There are cases where indictments have come down or guilty pleas are already in to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars that were fraudulently obtained, filing false claims alongside doctored paperwork. And the indictments are continuing to come. And the U.S. Attorney's Office has made very clear that this is a network of fraud schemes stacked upon fraud schemes, and that while the true dollar figure in terms of stolen funds at this point isn't quite clear, it's safe to say that we're talking about billions of dollars.
Okay. It's pretty wild, some of the things that you lay out, including one group called Feeding the Future that went from getting $3.4 million in 2019 to $200 million 2 years later. They grew faster than NVIDIA. How did nobody see that? Or is it that people and the government and those who are supposed to be the watchdogs, like Tim Walz, like Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, there just weren't looking?
See, I don't think it has anything to do with them not looking for it. I think they're purposely turning a blind eye to it because the Somali community has such a large influence on who gets elected in that city. So these politicians know that they need the Somali vote in order to win whatever they're running for over there. That's why you see them taking away noise ordinances so that they're able to play the call to prayer on the loudspeaker at the mosques 5 times a day, which can be as early as 3 in the morning and as late as 11 at night. That's why you see the people running for office speaking Somali when they're talking to the crowds that are around. That's why you see the politicians hanging the Somali flag in their offices, which makes no sense to me. Like, you're in America, you should only have the American flag and then your state flag if you want to have that. But to have the Somali flag doesn't even make sense. We are not in Somalia. Why would you have that there? But yeah, I would say that these politicians are fully aware that a lot of this fraud is going on.
I think it's safe to say that there was a real unwillingness or inability among Democratic state officials in Minnesota to recognize some pretty obvious alarm bells here. All across these programs, claims were skyrocketing, absolutely spiraling out of control over a short period of time. And the reality is that the Somali community, which is where these large-scale fraud rings have been concentrated within this population in the state, it is a sizable voting bloc. It is a voting bloc you have to win if you're
What I tell you, they need those votes.
going to win political office in Minneapolis. And so I think that was likely a incentive here that made some people not want to look too closely at what's been going on.
Wow. And that would explain why now it's the U.S. attorney looking into it rather than the state law enforcement or state fraud investigators. Is there any indication, Ryan, as you get, and it's one of those things, you drop an investigative piece and then all of a sudden you get 1,000 more tips, that this goes higher, like actually into state government? You get the last 30 seconds.
I can't confirm that. So I don't want to get out in front of my skis here. What I can say is that this story has generated additional tips, and it is something that we are continuing to look into as we push forward with our efforts to expose the fraud rings that have been taking advantage of the generosity of Minnesota taxpayers.
Yeah, stunning also how little pickup this has gotten around the country in terms of the rest of the media. Applaud your guys' continued work on it. Ryan, come back and talk to us as you uncover more, all right?
Excellent. Sounds good.
All right, y'all heard that. Now listen to how crazy this fraud has gotten in Minnesota. And you can't tell me that these politicians didn't know this was going on. This is wild.
Officers from our Fraud Detection and National Security Directorate, working in teams, have conducted over 1,000 site visits across the Minneapolis-St. Paul area as part of this operation. What they found should shock all of America. Focusing on a list of over 1,000 target cases involving more than 900 individuals, our officers encountered blatant marriage fraud, visa overstays, people claiming to work at businesses that can't be found, forged documents, abuse of the H-1B visa system, abuse of the F-1 visas, and many other discrepancies. Over the course of the operation, our officers found indication of fraud, non-compliance, or public safety and national security concerns in nearly a little less than 50% of the cases interviewed. We found troubling patterns with the Uniting for Ukraine program that should have raised serious concerns under other administrations, such as an individual filing to sponsor more than 100 aliens and organizations sponsoring hundreds. We are continuing to investigate these cases. Some of the other troubling cases that our officers found. In one case, officers identified an alien who had overstayed his visa waiver, who was the son of a known or suspected terrorist on the no-fly list. He had previously been found to have engaged in marriage fraud, which resulted in the denial of several immigration benefit requests. He was arrested and is now presently being returned to his country of origin. In another, an individual admitted to obtaining a fake death certificate in Kenya for just $100 to prove he was no longer married. In reality, his wife is alive, living here in Minneapolis, and is the mother of 5 of his children. And incidentally, he has another wife living in Sweden with whom he has an additional 3 children. In another case, an alien entered the United States without inspection in 2023, was released by Border Patrol. The alien married a U.S. citizen while in removal proceedings and was interviewed at the Minneapolis-St. Paul USCIS field office just last week, where both he and his American spouse, stated under oath that their marriage was legitimate. The USCIS officers conducting the interview were suspicious. The site visits were authorized the same day. The American spouse ultimately that afternoon admitted the marriage was fraudulent and entered into solely for immigration purposes and withdrew her petition for that alien.
I told y'all, this is absolutely crazy, the amount of fraud that's going on. And you got to be the scum of the earth, some just absolutely terrible people, no conscience at all, to say that you have a company that feeds starving children or helps disabled children or gets homeless people off the streets during cold winters. All the while, none of it's true, and you're just lining your pockets with hundreds of millions of dollars and sending it back to the Taliban. That shows that these people have no heart. They don't care about nothing other than pushing their agenda, and it is just disgusting. But don't worry, there's more.
$250 million fraud scheme. Already 77 people, many of them Somali immigrants, have been charged in one of the largest taxpayer-funded scams in U.S. history. Minnesota, home to the largest Somali community in America, has become the center of this massive investigation. This is the Feeding Our Future scandal, a pandemic-era scheme in which defendants allegedly stole over $250 million meant to provide meals for low-income children. Instead of feeding kids, prosecutors say the money went toward luxury homes, high-end cars, jewelry, overseas transfers, and an entire network of shell companies. According to the DOJ, the conspirators submitted fake invoices, fabricated meal counts, and even staged photos to make it look like they were serving millions of meals that never existed. In some cases, they claimed to feed more children than lived in entire neighborhoods. A federal jury found Amy Bach, the founder of Feeding Our Future, and Salim Ahmed Saeed guilty of conspiracy, bribery, wire fraud, money laundering. Federal officials say more arrests may still be coming.
Mr. Adal, can we ask you some questions?
Assad Adal did not want to talk outside St. Paul Federal Court.
How many vulnerable people did you leave sitting in a snowbank so you could line your own pockets?
But once inside, he admitted on the record that his company, Leo Human Services, ripped off taxpayers to the tune of $2.7 million while falsely claiming to help 250 people find housing.
How would you describe that $14,000 that was billed to your Medicaid?
Fraud. On every level.
I never met with them. I've never even seen them.
Carol Evan first began investigating the BMW driving business owner earlier this year.
We have so much work to do. I mean, I'm being asked questions here.
Well, people say you're not doing work, that you're billing thousands of dollars for work that's not being done.
Come on, man. Let's take the proper channels, man. I'm doing everything I am correctly.
But that was not true. CARE's investigation exposed a family fraud factory operating out of this Blaine home. Assad's brother, Anwar Adal, was running another HSS company called Liberty Plus, also stealing from taxpayers and preying on vulnerable Minnesotans desperate to find a home.
And you're sitting there in the cold thinking, okay, any day now, any day now. And that any day never comes.
When agents raided the Adal brothers' home, they seized stacks of cash, tens of thousands of dollars hidden under a mattress and in a suitcase beneath the stairs.
How did you and your brother get involved in this HSS scheme?
As part of his plea deal, Assad admitted he used the millions he fraudulently billed to lease that BMW and buy property in Kenya.
How much money did you move overseas?
Both he and his brother have now pled guilty to wire fraud and face 4 to 5 years in prison when sentenced at a later date.
These federal fraud prosecutions are just beginning to ramp up. Later this week, we'll reveal the latest findings in our Carol Levin investigation that uncovered how fraud allegations in yet another Minnesota Medicaid program are tied to a man's death.
Yeah, so you see that, and I think it's time that we're just honest here. These people do not have the same morals or values as we do here in America, and you can see that clearly in the way that they run their country. Go to Somalia, and it is an absolute disaster. It is hell on earth over there for women, for children. It is a terrible place to be. And anybody who follows the Quran, they want to spread across all the world, and they want to make one nation under Islam. It literally tells them in the Quran to spread, and anybody who doesn't follow the Quran is their enemy. And they can do anything they want to their enemies. So that's why they go to places such as the United States, who have soft immigration laws, go to Minnesota, who will let them literally do whatever they want and move up in the ranks in the government, and they funnel money and they ship it back over to the Taliban. But Trump's not having it, and he's saying it's time for y'all to get up out of here. Check it out.
Other news tonight, U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem was in the Twin Cities today, and tonight Noem says that there's no final decision made yet on whether to terminate the temporary protection status for the country of Somalia.
TPS is a program that was always meant to be temporary. It's a program that is put in place, and I believe for Somalia over 30 years ago, and will need to be evaluated to make sure that it comes and is always implemented in the process for which it was intended.
According to a congressional research report, there are 705 Somali individuals covered by TPS nationwide. Minnesota has the largest Somali population in the country. Somalia's current temporary protected status extension runs through March of next year. Meantime, many Somalis gathered in Minneapolis today to publicly voice their opposition. Fox 9's Leon Purvis joining us tonight from Minneapolis. And Leon, what are they saying about the president's proposal?
Well, Kelsey, many people gathered at Carmel Mall, the heart of the Somali community, to support one another.
Real quick, look at all the old liberal white women in this crowd chanting and singing along with all the Somali people. If this is not the definition of a liberal, I don't know what is. Textbook.
Carmel Mall was packed on the fourth floor with people from the Somali community and people coming out in support. On Friday, President Trump said that he would immediately terminate temporary deportation protections from Somalis living in Minnesota, blaming them for fraud in Minnesota.
We're not here by accident. We're here to stay forever.
There are currently 500 Somalis in Minnesota living with these protections and a total of 700 nationwide. Many expect this to be challenged in court, but in the meantime, Somalis here say they are fearful of what's to come.
People are always going to be fearful, but we're telling our people we're greater than their fear. We have resilience. We're people that are brave.
When temporary status is revoked, federal law states it can't take effect earlier than 60 days after publication of that notice, and it has to come from the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem.
What the president is doing is un-American. It is not Minnesotan.
The Protected Status Program for Somalis was launched in 1991 by President George H.W. Bush. It grants protections to eligible people who can't return to their homeland safely due to civil war or natural disasters.
What we decided to do is to bring our community in the heart of in the Somali community here in Minnesota, which is Carmel Mall, to show that, our neighbors are with us, Minnesotans are with us, and we're all together in this fight.
There's no word yet on if or when the removal of temporary status will take place, but experts say if someone is under temporary protected status from Somalia, to check with them on legal counsel to see what their options are.
You heard it themselves. They said, we're not here by accident. We're here to stay forever. And they're not going to conform to us. Like I said earlier, they want us to conform to them. Just like they want all the people there chanting their Somali chants or whatever they're doing. And I am 100% with Trump on this one. Send them back. Get them up out of here. This is one of the largest fraud cases in the country's history. Get them out of here because it's the largest fraud and that's been going on in the country. Getting sent back to a terrorist organization that wants us dead? Absolutely not. Get them out of here. Send them back to their country so that they can keep ruining their country and they don't ruin ours. You guys let me know what you think down in the comments section. That's all I got for you guys today. Make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.